Welcome to the Watermark Search webinar, everybody, on Essentials for Merger Success, featuring our associate Karen Isely. Today we will be exploring the connection between people experience and deal outcomes through an M&A transaction. And Karen will be sharing her latest research on this topic. For those I've not met before, I'm Caroline McAuliffe, a partner in the Watermark Interim Executive Practice here at Watermark. And I'm joined by my colleagues in Sydney, Lisa McAuliffe, Suzanne Mulvihill and Alicia Wilson, and also Jacinta Whelan and Donna Burr, our partners in our Melbourne office. I've known Karen for many years, and when we recently caught up, she shared the research she has been undertaking in this area of mergers, acquisitions, and post-merger integration. And it occurred to me that this would be really important data and information to share with our clients, as this has been a hot topic of conversation for us too when meeting our clients who had been through or were going through enormous challenges when undertaking mergers, particularly the people and team experience, the cultural impact, and the leadership strengths that are required. Through our service offering in Interim, we obviously assist our clients to fill capability gaps created by M&A activity. So this research is very relevant for us too. Karen is an M&A specialist. She's the founder of Isely Associates International, an Australian-based global advisory firm, assisting organisations growing through merger, acquisition, and similar transaction. Karen has a strong foundation in human resources and spent 14 years with Mercer as a principal consultant specialising in global M&A transactions before founding Isely Associates about 10 years ago. On the screen now, you will see the objectives that Karen had, key objectives that Karen had in her research and what we would like to deliver the research results to you today. Importantly, understanding the link between people experiences and the deal outcomes. M&A Fundamentals model, we're going to be introducing, or Karen will introduce an M&A Fundamentals model. And also explore leadership and the impact of leadership and cultural challenges throughout an M&A transaction. Look, we encourage commentary from you all and a sharing of observations. So please do use the chat option and also pose Q&A or questions throughout as we go. We will have a separate Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So we will get to answer all of your, or as many questions as we can get to. Any questions left unanswered, we will answer those separately after the webinar. We'll also, at the end of the webinar, be polling you on any specific areas of the research that you might be interested in us exploring in more depth at a second follow-up webinar. So please have a think about that as we work through the research. We will record this webinar and share the recording and answers to all the polling questions and the Q&A that we don't get to. Of course, we won't share any personal details of yours or the participants, and watch out for an invitation to a follow-up meeting. Now, moving on, and to start things off, what we'd like to do is to get a sense of who we have with us today in the audience. And we're going to poll 4 quick questions. If you wouldn't mind answering those questions, and we'll do a live update as to the answers. But firstly, what is your primary role? If you wouldn't mind giving us an answer to that. And the answers are in. 50% of our audience are business leaders and 19% people team leaders. But we do have, representation from M&A team, board advisory, and other. So thank you for answering that. But in the main part, we have business leaders and people team leaders with us. Second question. What type of organisation do you represent, please? We'll give you 30 seconds. Thank you for answering. And in the main part, 46% of our audience come from private companies, followed by nearly 30% listed company environments. We have a good representation from not-for-profit also, and some government and other. So, but in the main part, we've got private company and listed company as the top two. Thank you. Third question. How much M&A exposure have you had personally? And the results, in the main part, moderate experience, backed up then by significant experience, limited experience, but a broad range there of experience, but in the main part, limited, moderate, significant. So that range there. Thank you for answering that. The final question for you, given the environment we are in, how has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted your organization's M&A activity? And we're going to have you answer that, and then I'm going to hand over to Karen to respond to this answer, but also introduce herself and get into her research results. Thanks, Karen.
Thank you, Caroline, for two things, for inviting me to join you guys today, and also for your earlier kind introduction. Before I take you through to the results, yeah, I just want to thank the audience, everyone, for joining us as well. I'm thrilled to be here. One of my favorite topics, of course. As Caroline mentioned, this has been a little while in the planning. Earlier in the year, we of course were disrupted, like the rest of us, like everyone was, around the COVID-19 issue, and we made a conscious decision not to leap online and you know, do this virtually, and had this great idea that we were going to come together as a kind of a breakout roundtable face-to-face thing once things started settling down, and we would do something in Sydney and then we would do something in Melbourne. But decided about 3 weeks ago or so that this is really too important to delay, given everything that's happening in the market at the moment. There are heaps of opportunities going on, and there actually are a lot of organizations that are proceeding and continuing to work in M&A. So we didn't want to delay and avoid sharing this information if people were interested to hear it. So whilst not my favorite way of addressing a group on a topic that I love, here we are today, and I will do my very best to convey the spirit of this, even though I can't actually see your faces while we're doing it. So yeah, speaking of the market and what's happening out there, what I'd like to do is have Alicia share with us the poll results, see what we've got going here. Okay. So only 8% of you guys aren't in growing by acquisition mode or having it as part of your plans. And with the rest of you, actually the majority of the rest of you, 29% are expecting M&A to increase, or no change to M&A activity, 21%. So what is that? 50%, exactly 50%, no change or expecting to increase. And between slowing down and scaling back or going on hold, 21%. And only 4% of this group has basically decided halting M&A for the foreseeable future. That's actually more bullish, you guys, than what I've seen in some of the data. Although I have to say that the data that I'm looking at when I check the market is probably back from April timeframe. So things have moved on since then. But what we were seeing in Australia, Deloitte did some interviews with 50 heads of deals, and about 27% said no material change, and 15% said an increase. So about 42% no change or increasing compared to your 50. And about 60% at the time said that activity would be expected to decrease. So yeah, I'm thinking also there were some interviews that were done by Intralinks across Australia about Australia, New Zealand, and there is a lot of thought that there's the volatility that is going to actually give a boost in M&A activity, and there's also an expectation of some cross-border kinds of transactions that are likely to be happening. So bottom line in this, my understanding is that active M&A participants really are not holding back, and your data bears this out as well. There is a considered slowdown, but during that slowdown, organizations are using that time well, and they're using it to build capability and using it to look at opportunities more carefully and in greater depth, given the more challenging environment that we're all working in. So, as promised, and as it said on the package, I'm going to share with you my latest research. We'll start with an overview about how we did it and what we learned, the first thing we learned, and then I'll take you through what happened next. A lot has happened since the final data came in at the end of 2018. We've done a first round and had a big dig into it to share with you what we have today. We'll spend some time on what this means, implications for future deals. As Caroline said, ample time for Q&A at the end. And then I'd like to finish by leaving you with something actionable, a summary of how it is that you can prepare, how you can take something away today back to your office or at home if you're working at home, and actually start applying this. So the genesis of this research project is in support of a book that I'm writing. Working title is The Dealmaker's Guide to Humans. And that's where I pause in a room for people to laugh a little bit. But anyway, decided that this book needed a bit of direct client perspective, a bit of commentary from clients, and also I decided that I wanted to include some original research. You would all know probably that people experience is a very hot business topic. But what I found is that there's not much out there specifically relating people experience to M&A and M&A outcomes. So I decided to fill that gap when I was thinking about what to test. So specifically, we designed the research to test the impact on deal outcome of people experience. The hypothesis we looked at was that deal objectives are more likely to be met when people have a positive experience whilst they're going through a merger than when their merger experience is negative. We ended up looking at 198 deals. 60% of the deals we looked at globally were cross-border, and approximately 25% each, a quarter each, the role of our respondent was business leader, people team, or M&A team member. And the remaining 20% were either board members, external advisors, or employees. 44% of the respondents were on the buy side of the deal. So we're answering the survey question from the buy side perspective, and 35% were on the sell side. And in terms of deal type, we had just over half being acquisitions, just over 20% being business sales, and 15% being true mergers. And 57% of the organizations were listed, 30% being private companies. So again, a lot like those of you on this call, a good mix, and fairly similar proportions, actually, now that I look at it. What we did, how we went about this, is we asked the survey respondents to think about a deal that was memorable to them, you know, something that stuck with them that they wanted to tell us about. And we asked them all of that information that I just shared with you, so that we knew, you know, what we were dealing with. And then we asked them, did the deal meet stated objectives? And what was people's experience of the deal? And in the course of that, we also, because remember, I was looking for some shade and light and some life to put into the book that I'm working on. So in that course, we asked 4 open questions. What were the challenges? What went well? What went wrong? And what did you learn? Well, I've never had this happen to me in research before. I had 25,000 words worth of input. Just, I think of the 198 respondents, there was one, I think it was one, might have been 2, but I think it was one, only one, who didn't write at least something, an answer to at least one of the questions. So we got just amazingly great stories, so interesting. And also once we coded it, which I'll tell you about in a minute, we were able to quantify these stories as well to make them doubly useful. I won't keep you in suspense. What I'm going to do is actually share with you the very high level results first, so you don't have to hang out for them. And then I'll walk you through in more detail what this means for organizations doing deals. So what we found is that indeed people experience does predict whether deal objectives will be met. That clarity and leadership effectiveness predict what that people experience is likely to be. Culture came up as posing the biggest challenge. And then M&A fundamentals of clarity, capability, and execution, we found significant associations with both people experience as well as deal outcomes. So the big question really is, how can we use this? How can we best impact the people experience in order to improve our deal outcomes?
Karen, just before we go any further on this particular topic, can you clarify how you determined that deal objectives were met? And also, how did you measure people experience? Sure, Caroline, thank you. I sure can answer that. Look, these questions come up every single time, and the short answer is we simply asked. So first, with deal outcome, we asked, did the deal meet stated objectives? And we used a 5-point scale from yes, exceeded expectations, all the way down to no, we destroyed value. And we excluded, if we allowed people, actually, I should say, to say it's too early to tell, or I'm unable to say, or other. And we excluded these responses from our analysis so that we didn't actually skew our results by using data that wasn't actually going to be particularly reliable. The sample size still stayed well and truly big enough to make this work. So we were very fortunate in that. And also very confident that those who answered would have gotten it right, given their closeness to the deal. As for understanding people experience, first we asked the respondent, what was the experience like for you? And then we used a 6-point scale that started from one of the best experiences of my career, all the way through to one of the worst experiences of my career, with variations in between. And when they answered, of course, and of course we offered unable to say, so we didn't force people to say. The results were slightly interesting.
but not really particularly useful, because to have just one experience per deal wasn't actually going to give us what we needed in terms of drawing any conclusions. And so in order to make it useful, we added another question. We said to the participant, if you had to say, what do you think the experience would have been for the majority of people impacted? And again, of course, we offered unable to say, so we weren't going to force people to speak for others if they didn't feel that they could. And that is where the gold came. So what we had is solid data on what the majority experience would have been for the sample of deals. In the end, it turned out to be 192 for this answer. So significant number of respondents. So we had whether the objectives, quantitative data. So we had quantitative data, I should say, on whether objectives were met, plus the experience of the majority, on top of all of the data about the key variables that I've already shared with you. So on the quant front, and look, I've been warned that I can't get too geeky about this. When we did our first run through on this, the feedback was, oh yeah, it's really interesting, Karen, that first half when you're talking about the survey results, you know, maybe you could just do what you did in the second half when you're talking about the application, which was code for stop talking about numbers and geeky things. So any of you who want that level of detail, I just need to say, trust me, trust us, we did the work, this is true, and I'm happy to make my full results available for anybody who wants to really, really dig in. But at a high level, let me give you what we found. Yeah, people experience does predict deal outcome. What we found is that deal objectives are 4.5 times, or more than 4.5 times, likely to be met when people have a positive experience than when their experience is negative. And you might say, you know, that kind of makes sense. Yep, 4.5 times, okay, yeah, seems about right. I was quite curious and wanted to look into the data a bit more. And what we did is we broke the data, because we had enough in our sample. We broke the data to exclude all of the deals where objectives were only partially met. And so we were looking at data that showed deals were met or exceeded, and then data where deal objectives were not met and value was destroyed and left the middle out. And when we did this, these odds came to 23 times. So it's 23 times more likely that deal objectives will be met when people have a positive experience when compared to people who have a negative experience. And a little geeky stuff, significance of this is 0.000. And what that means in layman's terms is that these results, for these results, there's a 1 in 10,000 chance that these results happened by chance. I'm going to pause and let that sink in. And this is where there's astounded looks in the room and people are nodding and chatting with each other. It's kind of like the football, right? A little bit of sounds of the game I need to put in here just to make it more realistic. Yeah, so expected that we would see results like that, didn't expect that they would be as strong. So then what we did is we looked at the rest of the data, the rest of that quantitative data, to see if there were any other impacts on deal outcome, either directly on deal outcome or by having an impact on people experience. And what we found is that there was nothing that that we could use to predict deal outcome. No difference based on type of deal, whether it's cross-border or not, you know, buy-side or sell-side industry, deal location. There was a little bit of something around headquarter location in terms of an association, but nothing predictive and nothing, frankly, that was very useful. So no direct associations with deal outcome. And then we thought, well, okay, indirectly, what associations are there on people experience that might be interesting to us? And again, we found almost nothing. So no indirect associations, with the exception of deal perspective. So meaning which side of the deal are you on? And probably not unexpectedly, there were more positive experience on the buy side. So 66% of the deals on the buy side reported positive experience, compared to 44% on the sell side. So an association, but not predictive. So at the end of 2008, people experience was all that we had. So yeah, it was solid, but it was all that we had. And it's all well and good to know that people experience predicts deal outcome, but in order to do anything about it, we actually needed to know what has the most significant impact on people experience. So luckily, we had asked those open-ended questions. And what I want to do is take you through what we learned looking at these questions. So what was the biggest challenge, you might recall, what went well, what went wrong, and what were the lessons learned? First, we started by looking at the language to discover kind of key themes and what was getting airtime in those 25,000 comments, 25,000 words of comments. And then I spent the next 8 months in that mountain of verbatim comments trying to make sense of it. And then another half a year shaping what we learned into something that was actually digestible, understandable, actionable. And for those of you who know me, and even if you don't know me and you get wind of this, if anyone sees me or hears about me doing more research, and I don't have a full team of qualified research people who do that for a living supporting me, just remind me about how long it took me to do this one without that. I did have a data guy, because that's not me, but there was no getting away from a lot of hands-on for this work. So let me share with you what we learned. The first I'll go through is the language and the themes that set things up for us. And then I'll take you through what we found by turning those qualitative comments into quantitative data, so that we could again use regression analysis and work out what is the predictive value of our data. So here we go. Culture was the #1 word mentioned when we asked about challenges, followed closely by business, followed by employees and people, and leadership rounded out the top 5. For this analysis, what we did is we combined employees and people so that we didn't actually have that split result that would be potentially a bit misleading. After employees and people, business is the #1 word mentioned when asked what went wrong, sadly, followed closely by leadership. And culture comes in the middle of the pack. Again, after employees and people, leadership is the #1 word that was mentioned when asked about lessons learned. Culture hit the top 5 here, and communication made its first appearance in our themes. And after employees and people again, but at half the frequency of the number of mentions that it got under challenge, went wrong, or lessons learned, team is the #1 word mentioned when we asked what went well. And again, back to leadership and communication, rounding out the top 10. So I expect you're starting to get a feel for some of the themes that were coming through. So that actually helped us to think about how are we going to tackle this data and find out what it has to tell us. And in the end, we coded the data 3 ways. We started the first time we'd coded the data, so 3 ways, 3 separate times through that mountain of data. The first one, we actually looked at just on a time basis by deal stage. So read the comments and worked out whether the the story was referencing something that happened at the strategy stage, something that happened at the deal stage, or something that happened related to implementation. And the short answer on that is we came up empty. There was nothing that predicted anything there. So we went back to the drawing board and we did coding based on leadership, culture, and communication. So back to the whole data, and then assigned one of these categories if appropriate. And we picked these because, look, in the literature and in past research and just in lived experience, and also based on our themes, right? You know, these three really come up a lot. And so, cutting to the chase on that one, we did have a hit on leadership. So we can use leadership. We learned that we can use leadership to predict, there we go. We can use leadership to predict employee experience. So I could have stopped then, could have just gone, great, now we know employee experience predicts deal outcome and leadership predicts employee experience, and now we have something to work with, and we know what to do. We need to focus on leadership. But because I was getting so attached to the data, and because I didn't want to leave any stones unturned, stepped back again and looked at a M&A fundamentals sort of model for thinking about this. So execution was what we chose. And so clarity, capability, and execution is what we chose. Clarity being all about getting the context and understanding the context. Capability, all about getting ready. And execution, all about getting things done. We'll go through that in a little bit more detail once we're out of the data, but that's how we coded it. And let me show you what we found. Remember, we've already shown that people experience predicts deal outcome. Deal objectives are between 4.5 and 23 times more likely to be met when people have a positive experience as compared to when the experience is negative. So we already know that from our quant data. And what we've found here is that qualitative data also can be used to directly predict deal outcome. We found that meeting deal objectives is almost 4 times more likely when clarity is not mentioned as a challenge. And whilst not predictive, we found significant positive associations between deal outcome and leadership, clarity, execution, and culture. So now we're getting somewhere. Next, we decided to look at the indirect impact on deal outcome through the impact on people experience. And here's what we found there. Positive people experience is 3 times more likely when leadership is not mentioned as a challenge. And it's 5.6 times more likely when leadership is not mentioned as something that went wrong. Further, positive people experience is 3.5 times more likely when clarity isn't mentioned as a challenge, and also when clarity is not mentioned as something that went wrong. So now we're really getting somewhere. Whilst not predictive, we did find significant positive associations between people experience and all of these other factors. Oh, Caroline, you just popped up. Did you have a question before we go on?
Yeah, so what are the implications of what you found, Karen?
Look, the most interesting one for me was that you don't have to be perfect at this, but it is really, really important not to be horrible. Let me give you an example. What the data has shown us is that no one is saying oh, my leaders were so amazing, and therefore my experience was so great, and therefore I could contribute better to meeting deal objectives. No one is saying that. What they're saying is, when I wasn't worried about leadership, when I wasn't having a terrible leadership experience, then my experience was positive. Same with clarity, right? Everything was so clear, and so my experience was perfect. No, it wasn't that. It was, if I didn't have a worry about clarity, if I didn't have a worry about understanding why we're doing this, what I'm expected to do, and what this means for the future, if I understand what's going on, if I'm not worried about that, then I'm also going to have a more positive than negative experience. So you don't have to be perfect, but it is really important not to be terrible. The second implication is that preparation is really the key. So to genuinely prepare your leaders for this, and to get, behind the scenes and really get clear about things and be able to share that information widely, requires preparation. So preparation is the key. And probably the third implication for clients would be that building capability and running a good program, so executing well, really are the price of admission. Like, this is just table stakes. It's what you have to do to be able to show up. Doing that alone isn't going to be enough if you want to optimize the investments that you've made in the transactions that you're taking. Another implication, in the short term, probably less directly impacted for clients, but more for me and how I go to clients, is that this research has absolutely changed how I do this work with clients. So instead of a deal cycle, time-based approach to doing this work, so what do we do in the strategy stage? What happens in the strategy stage? What do we do and how do we do it? What happens in the deal stage? What do we have to do and how do we do it, etc. I've actually created a way to make sense of these fundamentals that impact on whether or not deal objectives are met, and really putting much stronger emphasis on preparation and readiness for deals. I mean, of course, you still have to do the work in order that it gets done, but this work in progress is really getting some traction as we've fine-tuned based on this research. So I am going to share with you this now. At the heart of it, people experience will make or break your deal, which is why we've put people experience at the center of our working model. And there are three M&A fundamentals that come into play. First is clarity, all about getting context, as I mentioned before. And this is about the operating environment, both the internal or external operating environment. It's about your business, purpose, strategy, model, structure, workforce, culture, being clear about all of those things. Being clear about your deal rationale, such that you can communicate why you're doing this deal in the context of your environment and your business, so that people don't freak out when they hear that there's a deal happening, and rather they just think, well, of course there's a deal happening. That's part of how we're doing our growth. I'm fully expecting this. Also, the impact on customers, partners, employees of the deal that you're about to do. And finally, thinking about the key messages. So what do you need all of your stakeholders to know, feel, and do in order for this to work out well? So clarity, all about getting context. The second fundamental is around capability. And when we talk about capability in this research and in this model, what we're talking about is infrastructure and enabling platforms and resources, both required for business as usual as well as for deals. We're talking about resources. How do you get resources in, and how do you actually make all of that work? Your functional support needs to be in place and working well. And you need a go-to team, both an internal as well as any external advisors that you can count on in order to do your deals. And finally, of course, your resources, your budget for getting this done, so that you can have it at the ready. So capability all around getting ready. And the third fundamental is execution. And this is all about getting it done. This is, how do you handle things with your customer, your sales force? What about your program and your governance structure and how you go about that? What about resourcing? How do you bring people onto the team? How do you actually, track that along? What about your communications? What about your culture? What about your support functions, and how are they going to support the deal? What about tracking deal results? And often forgotten and really not quite overlooked, I should say, is mindset. So how are people actually showing up to do this work, and how are they executing? Because it's not about just doing things, it's actually how are you being whilst you're doing them that is the difference in this case. So execution, all about getting it done. So these are the fundamentals. Next, I just want to mention again, look, in 43% of deals, culture is mentioned as a top challenge. And I said to you guys before, it's the word used most frequently by participants when we ask the question, what were the 2 or 3 biggest challenges that you faced? I've not made a space in this model for culture because it touches everything. From a research standpoint, not very useful because it predicts nothing, but culture is a given. It is absolutely everywhere. And what we found is that it is one of the top mentions in all of the significant findings related to these 3 M&A fundamentals, which is further evidence about how intertwined these things all are. So we're getting to my favorite part, and that is the kicker, turns out, is that M&A leadership is the essential link. So where clarity meets capability, deliberate M&A leaders, they assess, they prioritize, they invest, they prepare, and they do this much earlier than they think, than most think is necessary. So this is, what do we need? Who do we need? What do we have? What don't we have? What investments do we need to make in order that we are going to be ready to, and that everyone is going to be ready to do this deal when we do it. And again, much earlier than most people think is necessary. So usually this capability comes from CEOs, CFO, heads of business development, people who have information and access to, who are privy to what is going to happen on the M&A front. Where capability meets execution, influential M&A leaders are absolutely amazing role models. Absolutely amazing role models. What we cannot have in deals is to have business leaders running around with their hair on fire, worrying about what's going to happen to them, being worried about their situation. Our job is to make sure that they're clear about impact on themselves, that they're very focused on what is expected, and that they're able to role model the types of behaviors that would be expected of their teams during a time such as a merger or an acquisition. Absolutely critical role modeling. Also influencing and motivating and building relationships and developing people are all features of influential M&A leaders. Those of you who've been through deals know that as soon as it gets busy, and it does, as soon as things start going crazy, the first thing often to drop is, relationships, right? In families, we only hurt the ones we love. We, kind of drop some of that nicety and just, plow through and do what we have to do. So sometimes relationships can go by the wayside, or we stop developing people and we just say, look, we're going to set this over here for a minute and we're going to get through this deal, and then we'll come back and refocus on development. And it's just such a huge mistake. There is a big opportunity in terms of building relationships and developing people that happen in a deal. It is almost one of, in my view, I might be biased, but in my view, one of the best opportunities for people to learn and for people to expand and grow their capabilities by being in a deal situation. The number of people who talk about the bonds and the friendships and the camaraderie that happens in a deal is just amazing. And even in deals where people say they had a terrible experience, they still make reference to the connections that they made with people during that time. And all of this comes back to the behaviors around influential M&A leadership. This is showing up as a leader from the heart. This is how we're being, not what we're doing.
Karen, were there any surprises or other interesting findings from this work?
Yeah, look, absolutely there were. And actually, can I just hold on that one for a second and let me just finish where execution meets clarity, and then if I don't remember it, bring me back to that question if you would. So where execution meets clarity, we have the third kind of M&A leadership, which is galvanizing. And this is where you have an amazing, amazing project sponsor. Someone and a group makes decisions well and quickly, where communication happens effectively and directly, and activity is clearly directed. And this is also about testing things and adapting and being able to move at pace. In deals, pace is important, time is money. And the great thing about this is because we have the clarity about what is our business strategy, what is our deal strategy, all of the decisions get made based on the deal rationale, and not based on politics or not based on personal preference. And so things can move quickly and really with a lot less friction at pace.
Great, thank you. So yeah, just going back to whether there was any surprises or other interesting findings that came out of this research.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. There was so much, but if I had to highlight, one of the things is that leadership culture and communication combo showed up together time and time again. So kind of past research has flowed a little bit into this research. But the interesting thing that we found this time is that it seems that over the last 10 years, organizations have gotten a lot better at communication, much more effective these days. And so there wasn't a lot of drama or issues around bad communication. Everything has kind of stepped up to the next level, and the focus was really around challenges about clarity, so that depth. So that would be a surprise. In terms of another surprise, I alluded to it when I was just talking about the influential M&A leadership. I just have to reiterate, do not miss the opportunity to develop your teams. And use this as an opportunity to develop your teams. One of the tricks to doing this well is not to make someone do their day job and their deal job. Actually allow people to focus on doing a great job at their deal work and backfill the business as usual, day in, day out stuff. That's what the most experienced deal makers do. So don't miss that opportunity.
Brilliant.
And yeah, and I guess there's one other that doesn't really come up in the model or in the predictions, but it's actually about time and timing. The number of references to that were many. And the bottom line there, things like, we had no idea it would take so long. We wished we had started earlier. Don't wait. My only advice is, be sure to give people time to do the thinking, or, oh, we had to rush so much that we left some money on the table, that kind of thing. So bottom line, start early and don't wait to get people ready, so that when they're able to, so that they're able to hit the ground running and really help you when it's time.
Thank you, Karen. Now, we mentioned earlier that there is an opportunity to hold smaller groups in topics that have come out, or that where main interests might lie. So we might put up a poll now, if we may, and please choose as many topics that apply for you. If you're interested in us holding smaller group session to follow up, where we can, you know, explore those topics a bit more deeply, and you can choose, there's multiple choice, so choose more than one if you wish. Thank you. And the results. So leadership is the front runner topic at 76%, followed by culture and execution. There is some interesting clarity and capability also. But in the main part there, Karen, we're looking at leadership, culture and execution as the top 3 topics of interest that we might follow up in a smaller group setting.
Great, Caroline. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, given the time, we've probably we probably haven't got time for Q&A online. We're now, you know, at 8 minutes off the hour. So, Karen, I might just hand back to you to summarize before we close today. But we will answer all the Q&A that's come through the feed post the webinar.
Thanks, Caroline. Look, sorry guys, I think I got carried away on a few things. Again, my favorite topic. But yes, absolutely, we will answer those.
So I think you were going to just close off, Karen, with final thoughts.
Yeah, look, I will. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. What I wanted to do is give some thoughts around where to start and what you can do in order to take this away right away. And my best advice on this is that you should start wherever you are. Wherever you are, that's where you start. And if you don't know where you stand, you should find out. So there's a free diagnostic link available at my website. We've built a questionnaire that sits around this model that I've shared with you today. And you know, feel free to do that. If you pop your email in, I'll send you a report back. Or get in touch if you need a group diagnostic tailored for your business. Absolutely can do that as well. And look, if for some reason you can't do this, you're absolutely not going to go wrong if you start with clarity, because it predicts whether deal objectives are met directly as well as indirectly by predicting people experience. And of course, it has significant association with both. With leadership would be your next place to start, having a direct impact on people experience and significant associations with both. And also significant links to the M&A fundamentals. And culture is everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And so I would start there as well, because it is so difficult to separate that from leadership and clarity. So for my thinking, and based on the research that we have done, until all business leaders and managers understand what's expected of them, and everyone has the capability as well as the commitment to deliver, an organization is never going to fully optimize what they do. Let me say that again. Until all business leaders and managers understand what's expected of them, and they have the capability as well as commitment to deliver, an organization will never fully optimize any deal that they do. And saying that a short and simple way, if your leaders aren't up to it, you're leaving value behind.
Fantastic. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, everyone, for attending. As I said, just to wrap now, as we approach the hour, thank you for coming along. We hope you found that really valuable. We certainly did. Very insightful and practical from Gillian there. Thank you for that comment, Gillian. We will follow up with the recording, the answers to all the Q&A that's been posed, the answers to the polling, so that we've got some, you've got those results with you ongoing. And also we'll come back to you with regard to follow up smaller group settings or webinars for a more in-depth chat on those areas that you have specified. Thanks, Stephen. Excellent. It was excellent. Thank you, Karen, so much for sharing your research. It's really a hot topic. We know that. Thanks, Jim. Jim's great, has commented there. Thank you for that. So we will be back with our next series in our webinar series. So look out for that. But yes, certainly on this topic with Karen, we will follow up with a smaller group discussion. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. All the best.
Thank you, Caroline. Really appreciate it. Bye, everyone. Thanks.